Hey everyone, it's Denise Braun from caringourway.com, and welcome to the very first episode of CCC Chronicles. In this podcast and video show, we introduce you to our certified caregiving consultants and talk about their work in the world. And hooray for our first guest. It's Nancy Treaster. She's a certified caregiving consultant and co-host of a fabulous podcast called The Caregiver's Journey. So welcome, Nancy. Thanks for being here today.
Well, thank you for those fabulous, kind words. I appreciate it.
So here's what's so interesting about you. So we connected in May 2024. You were enrolled in the consultant training, which is pretty extensive. It's 106 hours now. And when you would have gone through it, it was probably 100 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And you completed the training while still caring for your husband, grieving after your father's death,
Yes.
and while helping your in-laws.
Yes. You remember a lot.
I do, because it wasn't like you had extra time.
But you know what? I was on a mission, and
Yes.
I knew before, because this was also before Sue and I launched the Caregiver's Journey, and I felt like I have three really solid dementia caregiving experiences, either ongoing at this moment or recent. And they're all slightly different, but I felt like, I was struggling, particularly with my husband, who I was caring for every minute of every day, with practical tips for day-to-day challenges. And I thought, I know a lot. And my friend Sue has also been on multiple direct caregiving journeys for people living with dementia, and her husband, as well as her father, and so on. But I feel like I need a broader perspective on caregiving. I don't come from this space. And so while I was doing caregiving, I really wanted to understand better about really the thinking around caregiving in general. So I took your core. It was recommended to me by Elizabeth Miller, who's the Happy Healthy Caregiver. She has a wonderful podcast as well. And I looked into it and I took it, and I got to tell you, it met exactly what I wanted, which was, here's a broad view of what happens to family caregivers. Here's a lot to think about. And I felt coming out of that much more prepared to do a podcast for family caregivers with more than just my personal experience.
And what I'm still amazed at is you completed the CCC training within a matter of like a month, I think. It seemed like maybe 6 weeks to get the certification requirements done, but it was in a very short period of time. You were on a mission, and you also had a deadline in your head. So
Mm-hmm.
you and Sue Ryan had already thought of, we're going to launch this podcast. You knew when it was going to launch, and I think it was August of last summer, August of 2024. So
Exactly.
enrolling in May meant you could be certified and ready to go with your podcast when it launched.
Exactly.
And what do you think changed? This is kind of I don't know if you can answer this question, but I'm just curious if you could think of what changed in terms of the conversations you had during your podcast because of the training. What would have changed for you?
It's very clear to me what changed. I came at it from, I went into the thinking when we were going to create a podcast. I was very much of the mind, I need to tell people what to do, because I know what to do now. I've been through it, and they need to know what to do. And I came out of the training thinking, I need to help people see what the options are so they can figure out what to do. And that's, I know sounds minor, and yet it's just a whole different way of approaching the same end result. I want them to come to these conclusions, but I need them to come to them on their own. And it's just a much better approach. And I learned that from you.
Oh, yes, exactly. And really, if I were to summarize the approach that we take in the training, is that family caregivers don't need to be rescued or fixed. They just need to be empowered, and then they can rescue themselves with the right solution, the right resource, the right help for themselves.
Exactly. And I learned, guess what? You train it, and I actually absorbed it, internalized it, and use it every day.
You, right? I mean, it only helps, it only works if the actual participants then really receive it and then bring it out into the world. And actually, the certification requirements kind of put you in that position to practice that and to see the results. You see what happens when you show up to really understand each family caregiver's specific, unique, unusual experience, and then really work with them so they can figure out what works for them.
So true.
Yeah, so
So
you
true.
practice that during the training, and then you see that it actually does work.
The whole different approach, but like I said, the content was the same, but getting there, the way we get there is different because of the CCC training. So I'm really proud of that training, and the fact that I thanks to Elizabeth for bringing it up, and like you said, I was a woman on a mission. I was going to get this training and get this certification before we launched and get a broader view so that I could approach things in a much more enlightened way.
You have passed your first anniversary with your podcast. How many shows have you released?
We've done 45. We have over 20,000 subscribers in the first year. About 45% of those subscribers are outside the US. We have a huge following in the Philippines and South Africa. Of course, Canada and the UK as well, but Philippines and South Africa are the ones that surprised me. And we won the #1 advice and how-to podcast in the US for 2025. And that had nothing to do with caregiving or dementia. It was the #1 advice and how-to podcast for 2025 by the American Business Awards. Just, I would say I was shocked when we won it, but thrilled, obviously, at the same time. I will put a little damper on it and say that I think there was a lot of sympathy or empathy around dementia caregiving and the concept of how needed this type of podcast is, because you get a lot of judges' comments and you can read through them and you can use them in your marketing and such. And definitely there were some comments around this is just a not nearly talked about enough topic. And the fact that Sue and I do it in a very structured way, all podcasts are around 25 minutes. We're very tip oriented. You've been on our podcast as well, talking about family emergency plans, but we try to put in front of families what they need to know in an easy to absorb way. And then we found that people were taking notes during our podcast. So we created a blog that matches the podcast. So if you're listening to podcast 31 or you don't have time to listen to a 25-minute podcast, you can read blog 31, which is the matching, if you will, written version of the podcast. And it's a quick read with the same concept, overview, tips, etc.
Okay, so this leads us to the other thing that you created, and let me show our viewers and listeners what it looks like. So you created a roadmap.
Yeah.
And the road
after a year, I laughed and told Sue, I said, well, we finally defined the caregiver's journey.
And you start with the beginning, the middle, and later on, and then include tips that are appropriate given that stage.
So we've defined, and this is just me, Sue and I. You won't find these definitions on the internet anywhere. They're just our definitions, but we defined the stages of dementia caregiving. This is not the stages of dementia for the person who's living with dementia, but these are the stages we felt like we consistently went through in our caregiving journeys. And we wanted to put the steps into stages because part of the challenge when you're a dementia family caregiver is you walk out of the doctor's office with a diagnosis of dementia for your loved one and all sorts of ideas about the medication they're going to be on and regular doctor's appointments and so on. You may, if you're lucky, get handed a handful of leaflets, but otherwise it's sort of good luck to you. And what we found is it's either I can't find any information, which was kind of my feeling coming out of this, or I have so much information, it's overwhelming. I don't even know what to do. And I don't know what to do now and what can wait until later. So we spent months meticulously working through the dementia caregiver's journey and creating what we wanted to be an underwhelming view of the roadmap. And it's 20 steps, but you don't need to know about it's divided into 5 sections. And you don't need to know about any of the other sections until you get through whatever section you're on. And it talks you through this particular section where you are in your journey. Once you recognize I'm in the beginning, we just had a diagnosis, so I need to look at the in the beginning steps. Or when you start asserting control, which is when the you're starting to tell your loved one, you need to put your pants on, your underwear goes on first, and then you put your pants on. You're starting to tell them what to do. And that's when it gets messy. And that's why we call it the messy middle, because they're frustrated because they don't know how to put their clothes on. And they're kind of mad at you for being bossy and telling them what to do. And so, the messy middle is really about you begin to assert control. We divided those steps up into 2 different sections as well. One, when you begin to assert control. The second section is when you realize you need more help, professional help, not just friends. And then the last stage of the dementia caregiving journey is what we call later on. And this is really when your loved one, they've relinquished control. They're no longer fighting you on things. They're looking to you to know how to do everything. And you're really managing all aspects of their care at that point. And then for each one of these, we have steps. And we show you a quick graph of the steps. And then we physically have a written right up behind each step as well. So this is a good graph of the first set of steps.
I accidentally muted myself because I was getting excited. So,
Oh.
So you know that I developed the 6 stages of caregiving, which is really the foundation of the CCC training. And something that I always think is interesting is how you premised what your concept is, and it's for the family caregiver, because I often have people confuse my 6 stages as about a disease process.
Good
And
point.
it's not, it is not. It's about the family caregiving experience and how it progresses and changes. And I really had, my whole goal in doing that was to answer the question, why me? Why now? What now? And so when I first developed it in 1997, it was about this whole, how do I answer those questions in a way that's educational, informative, and not overwhelming? Okay, so here's the other thing that struck me. So I have a guide, it's a book that people can buy that walks you through the 6 caregiving stages. And every once in a while, I think, I wonder if I should break it out into shorter guidebooks for each stage. And I talked it, yes, I talked it over with my editor, and she's like, it's not going to work.
Of course not.
Well, the way she explained it, I was like, yeah, that's not going to work. It's just this idea that it builds.
Right. You don't need to know about everything right now. You just need to know about what you're doing, what the stage you're in. Listen, I got to tell you, I talk about the pragmatic caregiver all the time because, and I'll let you tell people what that is, but that is my favorite part of the 6 stages, because if you can get to that stage, because there's no guarantee when you'll go through these stages, right? You might be a first-time caregiver, and frankly, my mother-in-law never got to be a pragmatic caregiver, never made it to that point. And I'm not sure my mother did either. But when you do become a pragmatic caregiver, it changes, your whole life changes. And so I wish I could accelerate everybody to pragmatic caregiver immediately.
Yeah. So we think about the pragmatic caregiver as the 4th stage. So you've moved from entrenched. And entrenched is when you're surrounded by tornadoes outside of you and inside of you. And when you move to the pragmatic stage, you think, there's tornadoes. And they don't freak you out so much. So you're able to calm the tornadoes down. That's the best way I can describe it. But what I think is so interesting is we can't look at these stages in isolation, which is why you've built this roadmap. I don't
Mhm.
think you can get to step 8 unless you've moved through some of the steps before, which is why I couldn't have guidebooks in isolation for each
Mhm.
stage because you
Mhm.
have to build.
Mhm.
You can't just jump in the middle of it and feel like, okay, I understand this, unless you've thought through and experienced and been supported around what happens before you get to where you are.
Mhm. And we say if you just are being introduced to this guide and you know by these definitions you're in the messy middle, please go back and look at the 10 steps in the beginning and make sure you've been through those 10 steps, because these, like the first 6 steps, are very get everything in order, right? Get your medical team in order, get your legal documents in order, get your financial stuff in order, find a support group. Step 4, you can't skip step 4. You're not allowed to skip any of these steps if I'm being honest, but you can't skip step 4. It's part of getting things in your house in order, right? So anyway, that's how the steps move. You need to get your house in order before you're ready to be educated on what's coming next, etc. So we did build it with that in mind as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think what people sometimes miss is the best day to build your support is on your best day.
Good point.
Because on your worst day, it's very difficult to register for a website so you can join a chat. It's very difficult to figure out where to park at a
Mm-hmm.
building you've never been to before
Mm-hmm.
and then find the room. You want to build it on your best day. And oftentimes, those days are earlier.
Right. And some of these decisions, you actually, for dementia, someone living with dementia, I mean, we do end of life planning in step 2. Because if you want your person living with dementia to have any input into whether they get buried or cremated, that needs to happen at the beginning. And then we the first, believe it or not, 10 out of the 20 steps are in the beginning, but we separated the in the beginning steps into 2 sections. First, these are 6 steps we want you to go through right after the diagnosis. And then most of them, when we change to the next stage, there's a sense that something's different in your caregiving. But the seconds, or the last 4 steps of in the beginning, the actual only thing that says it's time to now tackle these next 4 steps is I'm ready for more. That's it. It just means I can handle more. I've done these 6 steps, I've taken a break, and I woke up today and said, you know what? I'm ready for more. And that's when you do the next 4 steps.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
It's stressful. And it can feel like, I don't think I can work my way through this. And with support and compassion, you can work your way through it. Yeah, in the expectant stage, which is the first stage, I included the same guidance that
Mm-hmm.
everyone should really start thinking about your own wishes around end of life care.
Mm-hmm. And
Because,
sometimes it rolls, the nice part is it can roll into, well, everybody do it. We're not just
yes,
asking mom
yes,
to do it.
no,
Let's
everybody,
all
yes,
create our end
yes,
of life plan,
yes,
or let's all
yes,
create our healthcare directives, or let's all update our wills, or let's all get a financial power of attorney for someone in case something happens to us. So you can make it a family activity, so it doesn't have to be so focused on the person living with dementia, but it's time, let's leverage that. Everybody work on it.
absolutely. I would do it as well when I was working through it with my parents. And my sister, who, let's see, she liked to live in like goodness, like no problems, everything is
Lovely.
good. Yeah, right, which is not the reality. And so
Mm-hmm.
whenever I would try to say to my parents, I think it's time that we start doing this, and it really was an ongoing process. It took me years to get through, to get everything. She would
Mm-hmm.
say to me, Denise, you're upsetting mom. Let's not talk about this now. And then what happened is my brother died. And my brother
Oh,
died a year before my mom. My mom died actually a year to the date that my brother died, almost to the minute,
wow.
honestly. It was that traumatic for her. And after he died, and it was really difficult for my sister-in-law because they were in the process of organizing everything, but it wasn't organized. It really was a hardship for her. And then my sister said, "Oh my gosh, I get this now. We are never promised another healthy day."
Mm,
And that's
true.
why it's important for all of us to think about, how am I taking care of myself so that it's not a burden. I hate that B word, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's the only one I can think of for another who might have to step in and help.
That is so true. And one of the things I think is interesting that we talk about when we talk about the in the beginning stage that we're coaching people on is when you get a diagnosis, your loved one gets a diagnosis of dementia, you now take on the caregiving responsibility for two people. And your responsibility is 50-50. And it's obvious that one of those people is the person living with dementia. But if you're the primary caregiver, the other person is you. And you have to give 50-50 attention to caregiving for both those people. And it seems selfish. It seems, oh, I don't need that. I'm good. But that's step 4. We start that process really early because reality is you have to get in the habit of caring for yourself because and if somebody asked me yesterday, actually, a woman who's a care navigator, she said, how do I got this man and I can't get him to understand he needs to care for himself. He just keeps saying, no, I'm focused on her. I'm good. I said, well, you have to turn it around. And if he's focused on her, that's fine. Just say, you cannot be a good caregiver for her unless you take some time for yourself. Are you as patient as you could be? Are you as confident as you could be? Do you have peace of mind? If you answer no to those, you've got to back up and focus more on yourself. And I said, the great news is everybody answers no to those. So, so you'll get him no matter what, because if he feels like it's helping her, then that's how you'll get him to spend time caring for himself. And it's true. If you're a burnout caregiver, you're not a very nice caregiver. And that's not what any of us want to be.
Yeah, I also include self-care in the expectant stage. And I think of self-care as also the confidence to say yes or no.
I love that.
Yeah, because during caregiving, when you don't have a lot of energy, you might find yourself just giving the easy answer and not the right answer for you. And it's really establishing these habits that you don't have to build during caregiving, because it's very hard to build them during caregiving, but you take into caregiving.
I love the idea of the habits because that's absolutely true. You want that. A lot of this would be, how do I build good habits so that I don't have to think about them so much later when I don't have time to think.
Right.
I'm busy. You're going to get to that point. Unfortunately, in dementia caregiving, it will happen, and you will be drowning in caregiving activities. So the best habits are built up front. It's a good
Yeah.
point.
I did a program for a dementia support group, dementia care support group. And I can't remember if it was last week. Maybe it was just last week. And we talked about writing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the participants is caring for his wife. I've connected with them before because I've spoken to this group before. And his wife is receiving hospice care and really very close to the end. And what we were doing was practicing how we could write as a way to release emotions. And we were probably about an hour into the workshop. Everybody was writing, sharing what they were writing. And he said, "What is the purpose of this? I don't understand what we're doing." It was very interesting to hear him articulate that. He said, "I'm in my life right now. This is what it is, and I'm okay with what it is, and I'm focused on what my priority is, and that's being there for my wife. I don't understand why we're doing anything other than talking about being fully present for our carees." And I thought, this is really interesting. So we kept talking, and I said to him, "What if," well, actually, and then he explained a couple other things. So he would go for a walk and look at nature. He was very intentional about what he saw in nature. And I said, "Well, what if you wrote a 6-word story about what you see in nature?" And he was like, "Huh, what if?" And then I said, "What if you wrote some 6-word stories about your wife
Mm-hmm.
and then read them to her?"
Ooh, even better.
Yeah. And he was like, Oh, I can do that.
Mhm,
He had a very hard time thinking about it as what he would consider to be self-centered. And I
mhm.
say that as not a,
No, I know what you mean.
yeah, it just seems so self-centered to him. Like,
Mhm,
why would I write about how I'm feeling? Like, and then when we were able to position it as write about life and then read it to your wife,
mhm,
he was like, okay, now I get it. And I think
mhm.
it just reminds us that we have to be, again, really interested and curious about specific caregiving situations, and that it's not just advice that works for everyone. We want to think about what's right for that family caregiver right now.
Very good point.
So, for
Very good point.
instance, this family caregiver knows his wife is dying,
Mhm,
has very limited time left with her, and his priority is to be with her.
mhm,
And that is very different than someone who's new to the experience or someone
mhm,
who's entrenched by it. And we
mhm,
want to make sure that we are reaching the family caregiver where they are
mhm,
and understanding that where they are today is different maybe than yesterday and maybe different than tomorrow.
mhm. I remember something from the CCC training too. At one point, you said, there are going to be times where you're going to put aside what's right for you because of what's going on with your caree. Okay, that's okay. And give yourself some grace when that happens, and that's the right thing to do. It's okay. Just make sure you circle back around and don't get stuck in that, and bring yourself back into the equation as quickly as you can.
I came up, I had that insight because I was leading a workshop and we were talking about taking a break and self-care, and someone in the back of the room was crying.
Oh,
I thought, okay, something about this workshop isn't landing for her. She wasn't crying because she felt relief. She was crying because she was feeling a little distressed. So I asked her, tell me about the tears. And she said, I so appreciate that we're talking about taking breaks, but again, my caree is dying and I don't feel comfortable taking a break right now.
mhm,
And I think it's these two words that are so important, right now.
mhm.
And that gives us permission then to make a different choice at a different right now.
I love that. Yep.
Okay, so this flew by so quickly. Felt like I was just talking to you for a minute, but it was longer than that. Okay, so for our viewers and listeners who'd love to connect with you for your podcast and your roadmap, what's the website address they should visit?
So go to thecaregiversjourney.org. And when you see it, you'll see my face on the front and Sue's. And you can, in the menu, and actually there's icons at the bottom of the website that says guides, podcast, blog, social media. So you can click on any one of those, or you can go down the menu and see other things. But it's easy to get to. This guide, the roadmap guide, is the first guide you get to. And I'm struggling whether it'll ever be anything other than the first guide you see. So feel free to get to that. There's actually 4 podcasts that we've done to go through the guide where we discuss it in detail. The first 2 are out. So one is on the first 6 steps. The next one's on the next 4 steps. The third one comes out next week. And then the fourth one comes out 2 weeks later. So there's actually about 2 hours worth of podcast walking you through each and every one of these steps as well.
Awesome. Nancy, how fun was this today to
It
connect
was
with you?
great. I
I
loved it.
know. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for all you do for our CCC community as well as for family caregivers. It's
Thank you,
awesome.
ma'am. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks everybody for listening and watching. Please connect with us on our community, caringourway.com, and let us know how you're doing because we do love to know. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.